Hello, I'm Andy Agafangelo. I'm very proud to be the founder of Transparency Task Force, which is a UK-based certified social enterprise. We have a formal purpose. We exist for a reason. I guess we all exist for a reason, folks. Transparency Task Force's reason for existence is to promote reform of the financial sector so it serves society better. And we're all about making real change happen. We have a strategy for driving change, which is as follows. It is to bring together the thinking of those who have a sense of passion and purpose for the change that we want to see, with those who have the power, the position, and the predisposition to make that change happen. And that activity manifests in all kinds of things, from marches to responding to consultations to operating as secretariat of an all-party parliamentary group. But the key point I'm trying to stress here is we're actually all about making change happen. And as I understand it, a key part in any change process is about changing your belief systems, changing your mindset, changing your worldview on things. And why I'm so pleased that we have a conversation with George Kinder this evening is because George has been doing that brilliantly for years. He is known in the financial industry as the father of life planning. He's Harvard graduated. He's been at the forefront of the financial sector for decades, spearheading a movement that centers the idea that lives are worth living, are those things that have a real sense of purpose, and people should operate a financial plan to help them achieve what they are looking to achieve. Through George's books, workshops, keynote speeches, he's amassed a community of thousands of professionals globally in the field of financial life planning. George founded the Kinder Institute of Life Planning in 2003 after 30 years as a practicing financial planner and tax advisor. One of the many reasons I love listening to George speak is his remarkably creative, insightful, progressive. George has ideas that really stretch your thinking and take the thoughts to a place they probably couldn't go on their own. And tonight, as you all know, we are going to be hearing talk about fiduciary in all things, or fiat. Fiat is a movement based on the thought leadership of George. It's about the idea that civilization today seems to be flailing. George argues that a very simple tweak to our social contract between humanity and its institutions would right the ship. His thinking is based, his thinking is based on an analysis of how in our current structures, it is inevitable that the negative externalities of organizations scaling globally will also scale globally. So we find climate change, disinformation, autocracy, inequality, and the misuse of AI scaling faster than our ability to respond, each threatening in their own way to undermine humanity itself. George's solution, fiduciary in all things, would require institutions to be trustworthy and humane in all they do. It is framed as a single sentence legislative proposal, which is a fiduciary standard of obligation is required for all institutions, be they corporate, non-profit, and governmental, to place the interests of all stakeholders of truth, of humanity, democracy, and the living planet that sustains us first above their own self-industry. What a remarkable and profound vision for how things ought to be. We are truly blessed to have George with us tonight. I'm very, very grateful to you, George, for setting aside some time for our conversation. I'm going to be passing over to George in just a second. He'll be speaking for a while, then we'll pass open and make this a bit of a conversation amongst like-minded people with questions and answers and comments a little bit later. But first and foremost, folks, let's please show our appreciation to George Kinder in the usual way. Thank you, George, for being with us. Great to hear you speak again. Over to you, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. I love this group, by the way. I mean, I don't know you, but I know Andy, and I know I've been to a few of your events and just been stunned by what you're doing and felt just an incredible allegiance and alliance with who you are and what you stand for. So, of course, I know we all stand for different things, and there's differences among us, and I'm sure you'll find differences with what I'm sharing as well. But I was very excited to be anticipating this opportunity to speak with you all, and particularly to have a question and answer, a comment, a discussion afterwards. So Andy's pretty much given my speech in that 5 minutes. So if you have any questions, we can just go right to it. Um, no, seriously, I do think outside the box. You'll find that here. And at the beginning, it may seem simplistic, but I want to go way outside the box in order to begin this process of sifting down to something that you'll recognize a bit as being fiduciary, the fiduciary issues that you might be wrestling with or struggling with. I mean, one of the objectives of fiat, and much as I'd like to see Andy go on forever with his great work, but would be to put Andy out of business, just simply because, enough of all this stuff out there that the companies are doing or the government's doing. It's time to have, and that's what I think a fiduciary society would do. It would actually end those problematics that we're finding. So just briefly to start on fiduciary, just a fiduciary is, I think of a fiduciary as being compassionate. A fiduciary puts the needs of something or someone else ahead of their own self-concern. And the way that I'm thinking of a fiduciary society, and I think you'll see this, but this is certainly something ripe for question as well, is that a fiduciary society can be would be far more productive and profitable, far more energized and entrepreneurial, far more happier, and far less regulatory because there wouldn't be a need for it. And we'll look at what that might look like. And why would it be so efficient and so humane? The key answer to that is because it listens. So maybe I'm going to share, mostly I'm going to do this by slide. I'm afraid. I wish I was just here looking at you, but we'll share together in a moment.
While George is doing that, let me just say, folks, that we want this to be as interactive as possible. So please do feel free to use the chat for comments, questions, ideas, challenges, provocations. Anything, as long as it's civilized, would be very, very welcome. We're particularly interested always in points of potential disagreement through conversations around what we agree and disagree on. We can really get to a better understanding of what each other's perspectives and truths are. So let's make this as participatory as possible. Also, just to cover off the housekeeping points, we will be sharing the chat. We will also be sharing the recording from the session too, so we can help those who weren't able to join us directly to participate through watching it afterwards.
Unfortunately, I'm going to leave the slides on the side here because it gives me a sense of where we are. But the main slide we've got in the big picture here, and I really just talked about the essence of this slide, which is what would a fiduciary society really look like? What would it mean? And the second one, you'll see my book up here. You can look it up and find out about it. It's really all about this. It leads to fiat and toward the notion of fiduciary society and why we need it. But first, this connection between what is the connection between listening, freedom, and fiduciary? And what I want to say is that listening delivers freedom, and that fiduciaries are great masters of listening. So that's a frame for the whole talk. Um, Moving to the next slide. Andy already said this, and that's great because I think the more we say it, the better. I'd like to ask you, and have you ask yourself, how would it feel to you if every organization you encountered was trustworthy and humane in all they did? And I'd like you to pause with that and think about it for a moment. How would your life change? And I know it's very easy in a community like this, in any community, for people immediately to go to the obstacles. Oh, it'll never happen, or you think of all the ways that it isn't happening, or you think about how challenging implementation might be. I'd like you to just feel what it would feel like. What would it actually feel? How would it feel to you? How would it feel in your life if every organization you encountered was trustworthy and humane in everything they did? And then again, rather than going to objections and all that, how would your life change? And then moving to this next slide, which is rather a stunner after whatever your experience was with that slide. Let's see, I'm going to skip that. Let's see, where's this? This is Scientific American, December 2024, talking about how stunningly slow thinking is. Listening is 100 million times as fast as thought. I mean, that's just a stunning comment. Um, and and the question that comes up for me, and maybe it comes up for you as well, is how can we utilize that? How can we use that to actually make a more efficient, more productive society? Listening is 100 million times as fast as thought. And what kind of a critique is it on our society? Just hearing that. And one of the ways to understand the utilization of this piece of knowledge is that mindfulness practice is the practice toward the mastery of the present moment and of the emotional intelligence. That's exactly what it does. And those of you that have tried it and gone, oh, I can't do this, which many of us do, I've certainly had that experience many times myself. Even those moments themselves where you say, I can't do it, it's working because those are the moments where your cutting edge kind of your neurotic structures of just racing after things or being caught up in other matters uh, um, take you away from your ability to actually function. Mindfulness is the practice toward the mastery of the present moment. We've built our whole civilization on thought. Listening is far faster, more profound, and it delivers freedom. How is that so? How does it deliver freedom? So I'm going to move a couple of slides further. I'm going to skip this slide and go to this slide. Again, how does it deliver freedom? It delivers freedom. The way I think of it is delivering freedom in three ways. The contemplatives for thousands of years, for millennia, have talked about paying attention moment after moment after moment, and how it's delivered to them experiences of freedom, of uh, of awakening, of enlightenment, really extraordinary experiences. The work that I've done, that Andy talked about briefly, the work that I'm most known for is a work called life planning. And there, what we do is we listen in a really extraordinary way to our clients, and we listen in such a way that they move to their dreams of freedom, and then they execute on those. So we actually have the technology to deliver people these two kinds of freedom, freedom of each moment and the freedom of the story of your life. The thing that's perplexing us, disturbing us really, is what's happening with civilization. And I'm looking at most of you, and I'm thinking probably you grew up as I grew up, in thinking we were in a democracy and thinking that and hearing perhaps from our parents that in a democracy we can do anything. We can create whatever we need to have a great civilization. And certainly TTF and Andy and all of you are doing that in the fine work that you're doing here. We have this intuition that civilization should be a domain of freedom, just like moments and our lives. That it should be our infinite web of listening to each other, delivering freedom. Why isn't it? Why is it not? Why is that not happening? I'm going to move to that through this first slide on life planning, just bringing you back to how life planning works as a listening environment. So in great life planning, what happens the first meeting? This is a financial planner or a financial advisor with their client. The first meeting is 90% of that first meeting can be just listening to the client. And what happens in that listening is the client um, uh, gets so grounded and clear inside themselves because they're being listened to that they articulate a dream of freedom, something that they really want in their life. And it becomes so compelling in the conversation that they can't resist it. So there's a listening, there's a movement to this incredible vision. And from that vision there becomes entrepreneurial action. They move toward what it is that their dream of freedom really is. And it happens to everybody. Everybody they've seen. I've trained advisors, how many? 5,000 advisors, I think, in 30 countries. And first we life plan the advisors, and then they go and life plan their clients. So it's an extraordinary experience. And this experience, the experience is one of of listening and getting grounded and getting clear, and then moving automatically to action toward freedom. And I've seen it happen so often that I think of it as the structure of evolution, as how evolution works. And I think of it all the way from the smallest of quantum particles all the way to structures of civilization, listening deeply, getting grounded, and then moving naturally toward freedom. I think we all naturally move toward freedom. So let me see. By the way, I've just arrived here in the States. I've been in England for 4 months launching a startup that's based a lot on fiat, and I'm still just a bit jet lagged from arriving. But here we go. Let's go to the next slide. And this is the slide where I think you begin to feel like, now George is getting somewhere. But you'll see why I was talking about the other things in a moment. And this is one again that Andy quoted: as we scale globally, negative externalities scale faster than we can cope. So I wrote a book before my most recent book that you've been seeing pictures of. And that book was called A Golden Civilization and the Map of Mindfulness. And I went from that book on a world tour. And I went all over the world, rich country, poor country, autocratic country, democracy. And my notion was that people wanted the same thing, that as human beings, we want the same thing from our civilization. But I didn't give that prompt to the people that I spoke with. I had a big flip chart or series of flip charts, circles, and I asked them if we had arrived at a golden civilization, what would it look like? How would it be? If it's hard to imagine, imagine it 2,000 years from now or 200 years from now. What would it look like? What would it be? And what was extraordinary was that people put the same thing in it wherever I went, whatever continent I was on. Poor, rich, poor. They wanted community. They wanted kindness. They wanted an end to corruption. They wanted an end. They wanted to know the truth. They wanted to know that whatever institution was telling them something, that they could trust that it was truthful. They wanted to trust all institutions. They wanted to have adequate food, shelter, and healthcare. They wanted to know that the earth was not going to burn up. They wanted to know that the planet was sustainable. I mean, and this happened everywhere. Of course, they wanted an end to war. They wanted peace. Um, uh, and I was stunned by it, by how, in fact, it was identical everywhere I went. Obviously, there are some minor differences from place to place, but it got me thinking. This world tour happened before COVID, and then COVID came along, and I got COVID and got stuck as well. But I couldn't travel around, and so it made my thinking smaller and larger at the same time. And I began to think, all right, so if everybody wants this, how come we're not delivering it? And if, in fact, what we see here, these scaling of these problems, the climate change, autocracy, inequality, misinformation, AI, and the rest. If that's happening at such a in such a predictable way, it's like this, as soon as we get a new scientific discovery like AI, at first we think of the creative uses of it and the valuable uses of it, but very quickly we turn cynical around it and become quite concerned with what could happen. So if that's happening with everything, my thought was it has to be systemic. This isn't something that is, we're flailing after one thing after another. And I shouldn't say flailing. You guys are doing a great job, and so are many other people in the environmental field and inequality field. But in fact, everybody's going after their own silo. And my thought was, if this is systemic, we ought to be able to solve this problem at its base, at the system level itself of capitalism. So, uh, and part of it, what I realized was that these things are occurring because we've gone global. I mean, uh, so we're getting things that go global that are good, but they carry their negative externalities along with them. And there we are. Let's look at a few of these just to familiarize ourselves. Climate change, obviously, we know, or most of us agree that climate change comes because of the negative externalities of fossil fuels. What people don't always understand is that autocracy and inequality are very clearly the negative externalities of capitalism. If you think about how capital is structured, how capitalism is structured, it's structured in a hierarchy, right? So one would think that the negative externality of that would be more and more hierarchy. So that is obviously more and more autocracy and more inequality. We can look at it directly statistically by just considering again, a fact that you probably are all aware of, but it's pretty stunning to really spend some time thinking about. Here in America, where I am right now, there are 3 billionaires that own as much as 180 million people, as half the population of America. 3 billionaires. So the question there in terms of fiduciary, we all know that fiduciary in the system that we have is primarily Milton Friedman's fiduciary to shareholder. It's fiduciary to profit, essentially. And if we think about democracy, we think, well, maybe democracy has, for the people, by the people, of the people, for the people. We'd think that it would be a fiduciary to humanity or to citizens. So between 3 and 180 million, which I can't possibly count, but this 180 million over here, 3 over here, what fiduciary structure is operative right now, even in the kind of the democratic world? What is the fiduciary structure? It's clearly a fiduciary structure to shareholder. And when you go to the global slide of this, what you find is that there are 26 billionaires. It's much worse, actually, on a from a statistical standpoint, but of a similar order of magnitude. 26 billionaires own as much as 3.8 billion people. Again, what is the fiduciary standard there? What is happening? So my perspective on all this is that we're actually in an extraordinary time. And we're in a time where 90% of humanity has these cell phones. And what that means is that if we can get these to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth, rather than conspiracy theories, I think we all could, as humanity, could be making decisions that would be quite extraordinary for humanity. And clearly that's something that transparency is all about, telling the truth. Um, uh, so so I think the place that I want to take us next is, what does fiduciary look like now in society? And this is something that, as I said, I won an innovator founder visa over here in the UK. It's very rarely given, but it's to launch a startup. And I was in some ways surprised here. It's an innovation visa, and thought, how am I going to win an innovation visa? But it was the only way I could get over to the UK, and I wanted to spend a lot more time in the UK, and I felt it was the right place to launch this business because London is a terrific place to do it. Um, uh, but the only way I could get there was to do a business plan, and and submit it to the UK government for this visa. And they told me when I submitted the business plan, they said, "Hey, usually we try to get it back to you within 4 weeks, but if you look online, you'll see it's 4 months often." They got back to me in 9 days. So they thought this notion of fiat embedding it in business was very extremely innovative. But the two other things that had to be satisfied, they had to be satisfied with was that it had to be viable and had to be scalable. Let's look at the four corners of fiduciary here. So we know the corner in the upper left, and that's profit. The one that some of you are engaged with and related to, I don't know how many, but this is the area that I've been involved in, is fiduciary to client. Most of the advisors that I work with are passionate about being a fiduciary to their client. It means everything to them, and it's a noble mission, but it fills their hearts. I mean, it's who they are and what they really believe in. And they're just fantastic people, and I'm sure a number of you are in that community. And it overlaps the life planning community, the registered investment advisor community in the States, and the certified financial planner community. So that's a fiduciary concept that we know and understand. And of course, B Corp came along, what, 15 years ago or so, and said, hey, it still ain't working. The people are being ignored, part of the inequality thing that I just spoke about, the planet not being cared for. So they created this thing, PPP, People, Planet, and Profit. And I want to say I'm a great fan. I support. I don't agree with absolutely everything that they're doing, but I think, wow, we need people, just like we need the fiduciary, the transparency task force. We need people who are wrestling with these kinds of issues in corporations, how to make them fiduciary, not just to profit, but to people and the planet as well. There are a couple of, as I was creating my own understanding of this, I felt there were a couple of weaknesses. One was that People and Planet didn't touch the two things that seemed to be becoming most endangered in the last decade or so, and that is the truth. A lot of people talk about us being in the post-truth era, and at the truth, and the other one is democracy. And I thought, I want those two things in here. So fiat, fiduciary in all things, includes truth and democracy as well as people and planet. That's one of the differences. The other difference is that people, planet, and profit. Well, there are two other differences. The other major differences is that I think fiat should be the law of the land. This is not something to be voluntary. We've seen enough voluntary stuff. ESG has been largely voluntary. We need texture to this. We need law to this, so people know this is the way it is. And so I think those are the major differences. Let me see if there's anything else I wanted to say here. One other thing, back to the listening idea. Under fiat, fiat is fiduciary in all things. It's the acronym, right? Under fiat, listening becomes capitalism's dominant trait. Listening becomes capitalism's dominant trait. And dystopian negative externalities virtually disappear. So how do we do this? And how does this happen? And my experience with life planning is you build a strong vision, make it as grassroots as you can. And if you have a really strong vision, it's very hard to stop the momentum of it. So that's part of what I'm doing. Andy was asking me how much I was speaking about this to groups and communities, and I'm speaking every week, I think, to a group at least. And this week I'm speaking to several, and next week I fly to California and I'm speaking to the largest financial advice conference in America, 5,000 people. So I'm eager. I speak everywhere. I want to make this happen, but I'm eager to find other people who speak about this too, because I can't do it all by myself. But this question of how do we bring this in particular? How do we bring it into the world? How do we bring it into organizations? How do we bring it into businesses? Is where I'd like to go next in the talk. And the first thing is we need a broad vision. We need a vision that's simple enough that everybody gets it. We need to spread it widely. And then my task that the UK government has given me 3 years or they'll kick me out to do is to build it into a business so that businesses see that they're going to be much more profitable and productive in doing this. I want to say one more thing. The fiduciary to client piece. If we, and I know there are a number of you in this group, if we are fiduciaries to our clients, how is it that we've allowed the companies we work with, the institutions around us, not to be fiduciaries to our clients, to people, planet, profit, truth, and democracy? Why have we allowed that to happen? And so part of my notion in doing this is that I can talk to fiduciary audiences of financial advisors everywhere and just say, it's time you talked to the institutions around you. If this works for us, and it does, it makes great businesses. It makes for incredibly happy clients and advisors. If it works for us, it should work for you too. And it's time you did it. It's the right thing to do. So I think we need to start talking about that. But again, this question of how do we get from profit all the way to fiat? There are two ways that I'm going to talk about. One of them is just simply the simple proposal, which is the vision, grassroots vision. The simpler vision is that every institution is trustworthy and humane. And that's why I started this conversation with that. But the legal sentence that I use. And then the second thing is about building listening into our organizational structures. Listening being 100 million times as fast as thinking, and listening being the fundamental thing that a fiduciary does. And if we want to be sustainable for the world around us, we need to be great listeners to the world around us. So going to the next slide here, this is the slide of the legislative proposal. This is what I'm promoting, a one-sentence legislative proposal. I'll just read it again. I think Andy read it the first time. A fiduciary standard of obligation is required for all institutions, corporate, nonprofit, and governmental, to place the interests of all stakeholders, of truth, of humanity, democracy, and the living planet that sustains us first, above their own self-interest. And I just want to speak for a moment of outrage. How is it that we ever, as humanity, set up this structure, this capital structure of incredible leverage, where first of all, we can draw capital in, then we can leverage with debt, and then we can further leverage with media power. And now, of course, we're letting these organizations into politics. How could we ever allow that amount of power to place their own self-interest ahead of the truth? Right? How could that? That's certainly not something that humanity would stand for if they really knew that that was drawn clear for them, or ahead of humanity, of democracy, or of the living planet. So it's time we made that shift, and it's time historically. And if we do that, I mean, because it's time because the earth has come together. We're one earth, one people for the first time in the history of humanity. We are one. And rather than these nation states, this is what we should be working on. How do we actually make that work, that oneness work? So the next slide is a video, and let's see if it works. And I'm just going to talk over it. So I've come to think that an organization that we've not been thinking about the structure of corporations, of businesses in an appropriate way. We think of them as a hierarchy. We think of them as a machine. We think of them as a computer program or data processing. Um, uh, that's none of those things are really sustainable. Uh, and I've begun to think that maybe we should be thinking about our organizational structures as if each organization was a tree. And it doesn't work perfectly, but think about this for a moment. A tree, take an oak tree, a big oak tree. How many leaves does an oak tree have? It's unbelievable. They have 500,000 leaves. And each one of those leaves is listening to its environment. You can think of it as employees, you can think of it as workforce. Each one of those leaves is listening to its environment. It's listening to the insects that are crawling along it. It's listening to the wind that sweeps it back and forth. It's listening to the rain as it comes down and calls that nutrition into its structure. It's listening to the sun. It's creating photosynthesis as it's doing this. And each of these leaves are the lungs of the tree. So they're breathing in the carbon dioxide and breathing out oxygen. So they're breathing in the carbon dioxide so they can breathe, so they can live. And they're breathing out oxygen so all of the rest of us can live as well. Talk about sustainable. A tree doesn't need any regulation. Doesn't need any regulation because it's already listening to the environment and evolving and listening in a way that is sustainable, that is friendly to the world that it lives in. So, so those are the two ways, and I want to talk just a bit more about bringing this into business because I think business is not structured to listen. Business is structured like a war machine. It's structured as a hierarchy. And so if it works for the self-interest of the business to hide information, they're going to hide information the way they're structured. So what I'm doing as I my work in the UK with organizations, with businesses, is there are three ways primarily that I'm bringing this quality of listening into businesses. And one is, how do you harness this 100 million mind moments faster than thinking listening is? How do you do that? And what if you could? Wouldn't it make everybody smarter? And there are a lot of studies around mindfulness and intelligence and that confirm that it makes people smarter. The more you do this kind of work, paying attention to individual moments. But the other thing that should be obvious to everybody is that everybody knows that you can learn to focus better, that there's less ego involved, so there's less tussling like this. There's more emotional intelligence that's delivered all the time as you do that practice. So one of the things is to understand what listening is in its most minute form so that we all become better listeners. Second thing is kind of a radical thing in terms of corporate structure, corporate governance, if you think about it. I want to break the unspoken barrier. I mean, there's this barrier between CEOs and the rest of the company. I mean, you could put the directors up there too, or the top leaders, but let's just talk about CEOs and the rest of the company. If you're an employee of a company, do you want to, and you're eager for, to keep going as long as you can, but the truth is you want to play guitar along the beaches of the Mediterranean. Are you going to tell your boss that that's what you really want to do? Most people wouldn't, right? Because there is this unspoken barrier, which is I'm not going to tell them who I really am and what I really want. And that we see that in something called quiet quitting, where people aren't really working that well or that honestly or that hard in the business. In a lot of ways, we can see it in businesses. And I think what's happening, what we're missing is, and those of you that know life planning understand this, when someone gets life planned, the entrepreneurial energy that they become filled with because they see who it is that they really want to be is extraordinary. And that energy is totally blocked in a company because the company does not support, it does not place their people first. And all this talk about social capital and all that kind of stuff. Mostly it's talking about giving skills to the company, to the workforce, but it's not actually honoring who they really want to be. The most powerful thing in their lives is their dream of freedom. And and that's something that can be uh, harnessed and both unleashed, so the power is there, and harnessed by celebrating who everybody is, the workforce, what they really are passionate about. So that's something that we're doing. And then the third thing is, so this is really honoring people, but first honoring the workforce in a way that they would most like to be honored, to live their dream of freedom. And then the third thing is this notion of fiat. You know, the again, I want to contrast with the B Corps, and I don't I'm not I love B Corps and I love what they're doing. So don't interpret me. It's just that there's a difference. And in that a B Corp has a certain set of regulations and requirements. And I think again, they're wonderful. We're learning a tremendous amount from them. But it's to some extent that becomes top down. What are the rules and regulations that the company should be following and that the company has decided it's going to follow? When I work with the company, I ask the CEO to sign on to fiat. Doesn't mean that they're not a B Corp, doesn't mean that they're not for profit. But I ask them to sign on that they understand and believe that fiduciary in all things should be the law of the land. But then what we do in the company is we internalize that once the employee knows that they're honored for their own dreams of freedom, now they're feeling that the company is alive in a way that honors them. Now it's time to take fiduciary and bring it into the hearts of everybody in that community, the hearts and minds of everybody in that community, so that everybody working there creates their own personal fiat. They internalize it and then they radiate it. So, and the CEO, the leadership, they see all of these different leaves structured in different ways, all of them listening to different things because that's who they are. And that's what they really care about. Again, this quiet quitting, a lot of what we see in the younger generation is they feel we've lost our ideals, our values. And this is something that is not a top-down value, but is going, okay, here's kind of a top-down thing. We see what you want to do. How would you create your own personal fiat? Bring it in. Let's make it happen. So one more thing, and then we'll open to conversations, I think. Um, what can you do? I want to talk to this because, as I said, for me, the purpose of making these talks is to gather more people who might be part of that grassroots movement. There's a website, fiduciaryandallthings.com. It's very simple. It's a couple of pages, and it has a number of things in it. One of those things is called the Fiat Pledge, but really it just says, yeah, I support this, and this is why. So you can write your own version of why. But we need your support. And if you're willing to put something in there, that would be wonderful. But the other thing is these logos are quite beautiful. And you'll see that I share the fiduciary one on the left a lot. I share the one on the right occasionally as well. I put them in my signatures. I put them on my websites. I put them on my social media to let people know. And others are doing that as well, and we encourage that because it's like the organic symbol. Unless people see this symbol, they're not going to know what does fiduciary mean and what's it about. And if they do see it, the people that have put it on their websites and things are getting questions. What does this mean? And it's wonderful because then they can talk about this notion of a fiduciary society and how profound it would be if things were to change in that regard. The final thing that's there, there's a few other things, but the final main thing that's there is something I call a kitchen table conversation. It's a really easy thing to do. Gather your kids, your family, your friends around your kitchen table and have a conversation about fiat. And the way I would suggest it, because it can quickly get into, oh, that will never happen. In America, the Republicans will never let that through, whatever it is, and is not to lead with not to lead with something that's going to set that up, but ask the same kind of question that I asked you early on. And here it is. How would it feel to you if every organization you encountered was trustworthy and humane in all they did? Ask your friends and family around in your living room, around your kitchen table. How would your life change? And if they start talking about the obstacles to it, say, no, 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 no. No, let's get the vision straight first. How would it feel to you? How would it feel to you if this happened? Get that embedded because we deserve that. And that's really the vision here that's going to launch this, more so than the legal sentence, the legislative proposal. How would it feel to you? I did this, and then we go on to the legislative proposal and other things. But I did this in my home last December. My kids had brought some friends home from college, and we gathered them and some friends from the community, and we gathered around our kitchen table, and we asked these questions, and we set it up in just that way. And the responses were quite touching and quite wonderful. The main thing, of course, that people said was, "Wow, oh, what a breath of relief that would be. I'd be able to relax. I'd be able to relax, which I really can't do now. I'd be able to trust, everything really, be incredible." Other people talked about, I'd be able to do something entrepreneurial. I'd be able to really launch something and not have this backbiting or whatever it is that would stop me. I'd have support. I'd be able to do something. The most poignant thing that happened came from one of the young women who was there. And she said, George, I I think I I might consider having children after all. I think I might consider having children after all. I want to end dystopia. I want to end it. I hope you'll join me in helping making a fiduciary society by making it the law of the land. So we can come back to these slides at any time, but I think I'll get out of the slides and come back to each of you. And again, Q&A.
Wow. 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 George, where do we begin? Where do we begin? If you don't mind, may I first
Yeah,
thank you very, very much for something quite specific. The slide you put up, which was the provocation, I can't remember it verbatim, but the gist of it was, what would it feel like to you if every organization you interacted with was trustworthy and dealt with you in an honorable way? Allow me
right.
to share with you where my mind went about 5 minutes ago when you
Yeah,
did that. Okay, so
yeah,
I'm just gonna take you there.
yeah.
It took me to a film that I remember watching as a child a few times, and it was a film called The Time Machine.
Huh.
And it's an old film. I actually got it up on my laptop in just a few seconds ago. And it's the idea of this guy who basically invents a time machine. It's a lovely, beautiful old film. And he goes through time and he goes to a world in the future, I think it is. Yes, it must be in the future, where he meets two tribes. I'm oversimplifying here, George, okay? But he basically meets two tribes. There's one tribe on this future Earth that is aggressive and violent and angry. And I sometimes worry it's where we're going. But there's this
Yeah,
other tribe where all the people are beautiful as people. They are peaceful. They are in harmony with each other. They don't understand things like war or violence. It's a complete anathema to them. Okay.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
haven't thought about that film, George, for maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing 20, 30, 40 years. And
yeah.
I wanted to share with you that that's where my mind went.
Yeah.
when I started to conceive of my answer to your question, what would it be like? It
Yeah.
would be lovely, wouldn't it? If it'd be really lovely if every organization treated everybody, customers, stakeholders, the planet, in a progressive and honorable way. And I feel the stress coming down.
Yeah.
You no longer feel like you're kind of on your guard. And during parts of what you were saying, George, I was saying to myself, I was fighting the urge to say to myself, yes, but this is just kind of theory, and most companies aren't anywhere near this kind of thinking. And there's too big a gap between the status quo and that utopian view that you're building for us. And then you said, let's get the vision straight first. And I really bought into that, George, because if we get the vision straight about how good things could be for us, our society, our planet, if we can envision that, then the dynamic changes completely. It starts feeling like it's a dream that we can actually make real. And I genuinely want to thank you for allowing my mind to go somewhere that was very sweet and very, very, very excited. A set of thoughts that I probably haven't been to for many, many years, perhaps even since a child. And
Yeah.
I highly recommend everybody watch the 1960 film, The Time Machine. And then when you watch it, think about that beautiful tribe of peaceful, beautiful people living in harmony with each other. Maybe
Yeah.
that's the future we can make for ourselves. George, before we go to Barbara, who's put her hand up,
Yeah.
please do reflect on what I've said if you would like to. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's I mean, I'm really touched, and that's the reason I, insist on people pause and really listen to it, because immediately we just disregard it and dismiss it, and why I came back to it in the talk as well. Um, I think the other thing to realize is, I mean, again, this is back to the incredible work that you're doing, Andy, and that the group here is doing, is that we do need an appropriate structure that allows the goodness of that part of humanity to come forward. And when you have a structure that is only fiduciary to shareholders, you have the three billionaires versus 180 million. It clearly is dysfunctional in regard to humanity and the planet and now the truth and democracy. So we need the structure, absolutely. But once you have that structure, leadership in all organizations becomes, as I mentioned, more dominant, more predominantly listeners than this aggressive, kind of battle
Yeah.
war machine that we found. And so I'm with you. I think that's where we have to be headed. It's the only sustainable place, like a tree.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, George. I've just found a little bit of blurb online. That peaceful tribe of people are called the Eloi, a race of gentle, childlike, and complacent people who live a life of ease on the surface of the earth in the far future. Wow, I'm gonna rewatch that film. Thanks, George. Barbara Williams. Barbara, I always love you when you come to our meetings because you cause me to rethink my thoughts in a very, very provocative way. Go for it, Barbara. I'm sure you're going to do it again. Go for it. Thank you.
Gosh, that was extremely inspiring. Um, it wasn't quite sufficiently outside the box for me because it sits very firmly within growth economics. I mean, you're talking about productive and profitable. I'm assuming you're talking about financially profitable rather than ecologically profitable. If you could, if you could bend your vision so that we start looking at working to an ecological budget rather than a financial budget, I would like it, or I would see it as feasible. What the way you're talking now is very business orientated, and that isn't going to buy us a sustainable, or it's not going to enable us to arrive at a sustainable planet. So
Barbara, But Barbara, allow me to interrupt because your thoughts are so interesting. Your thoughts, as I understand it, Barbara, are built around the idea of degrowth. And some of us may not be familiar with degrowth at all. Could you just spend a moment or two, Barbara, explaining the concept or the philosophy of degrowth? Because I think people need to understand where you are on the, if you like, on the spectrum of progressiveness, because you're right out there. Go for it, Barbara. Thank you. What's degrowth?
Mm, Growth is a spectrum of ideas at the moment. And I recently posted in Circle a, a nearly 2 hour long interview that Jason Hickel, who's the leader in the mainstream degrowth movement, did recently, which gives a lot of feel for how they're analysing why we're incapable of solving our problems within the growth paradigm. And he does an excellent job of it. I come in from a very specific scientific angle, which is the insights from the IPAT equation, which I can pop in the chat. The IPAT equation was arrived at back in the 1970s, and it told us that the negative impact that we have on our environment has got three key drivers: population size, affluence, and the way that we use our technology. Now, growth economics increases all three of those drivers. So while we're still trying to grow our economy and our population, then we're increasing the damage that we do to our ecosystems. So I'm saying that there's actually the IPAT insights and the fact that we're in ecological overshoot have been for 50 years at least. Those two scientific insights mean that from the fiduciary point of view, we're failing in our fiduciary duties whenever we have a stock exchange that's based on growth economics. So that is a very simple way of saying, oops, we need to shrink our affluence per capita, our population and our and we need to be less reliant on technology. Technology is very important, especially communication technology, because we couldn't have this conversation today without it. So I'm the extreme end because I'm saying we need to reduce all three of the drivers voluntarily if we want to avoid extinction. The rest of the degrowth movement come in with different ideas somewhere along that spectrum between not growing the economy at all and actively trying to shrink your population, your affluence per capita, or your technology.
Barbara, thank you so much. We'll go to George in just a second. But as I understand it, the idea of degrowth is to get the planetary system back into equilibrium, because at the moment it's all out of kilter because we're consuming too much of what our planet can provide. Is that the basic gist of it, Barbara?
By my calculations, we need to shrink our whole human enterprise by about 75%.
Wow.
So that's our footprint per capita and our population size. If they came down by 3/4 of what they are at the moment, we would have a chance at long-term survival.
Thank you very much indeed, Barbara. As always, very thought-provoking. And I like the challenge Seb put in the chat. He said, Andy, degrowth is not right out there. Thanks for schooling us, Seb, as you do. Please do chip into that. George, back to yourself. Where does the concept of growth stroke degrowth fit into this paradigm, or does it not at all? Where are you at on this?
Well, I'm 77 years old, and I realized when I'd finished my life's work, I was my life's work was a series of poems. And I mean, people think of me as being the father of life planning, and you spoke to that, and that's how people I'm known. But I never thought of that as being my life's work. My life's work was I arrived at a piece of land that went out into a lake 30 years ago, and I wanted to explore what the nature of the present moment was. And I wanted to do it in a way that gave nature the opportunity to speak to me and me to speak to nature. So in a way, I think I'm even more radical than what Barbara's talking about in terms of listening to nature and having nature tell you how to go. And I wrote 5 books over 30 years with 5 book a weekly book of every single week with photographs and poems, and every single day for 30 years, and to inspire people to live more in nature, live more, to be more present. So when I finished that work at age 77, I thought, what am I going to do next? And this is where I'd written the book on golden civilization, and I thought, the world is really messed up, and I want to do something about it. So I'm using all of this as a way of framing growth. What does growth mean to any of us? I believe in growth. Because I can feel that as I grow older, the leaves of my being are becoming more colorful, more varied, more alive. And I hope that happens right to the moment of my death. So I think growth is even deeper and stranger and weirder than Barbara's talking about. And my thought is that if you have a society that is fiduciary in all things, where Barbara, we place the earth ahead of the profit. The profit is still, the shareholders are still part of our fiduciary responsibility, perhaps, but the truth is ahead of that. The planet's ahead of that. Democracy's ahead of that. Humanity's ahead of that. Then, and we don't have this incredible inequality that we have. People like you in the degrowth movement will have a lot more ability to converse and access to media and all that kind of thing. And I think that I think we'll get much more of that happening. 100 million mind moments per thought. Talk about growth. What is going on there? There's a lot here. I don't know if I'm being as clear as I would like, but I think what I'm saying is that I think of growth in much more dynamic, much larger ways than strictly the profit of capital driven by shareholder fiduciary responsibility.
This is a fantastic conversation. We'll go from George to Robert, then to Eric, then to Seb, and obviously George chipping in as we go. Mr. Robert Delmer, thank you very much for being here. Off you go.
Thank you. Hi, George. Good to see you again. And thanks again for your talk, and particularly your work in general. And maybe next time in London, we'll find a restaurant which didn't close in COVID, and we'll get together to have a chat. I want to go also quite outside the box for a moment, but frame it as a sort of an idea or as a suggestion that sort of came to me as you were speaking. Because we both know how difficult it is to get the ear and mind of organizations and their leadership. So in what format can we actually enter organizations to become catalysts for change or development in whatever shape or form, which is in a non-intrusive, non-threatening, helpful sort of way? And while you were talking, I came up with this little idea. Fred, think about AI in terms of what it can do for us in general. And you had AI on one of your slides. What about if there was an AI function, and let's call it FRED, which could stand for fiduciary responsibility in all things, responsibility for civilization, economic, and democratic, FRED. And this FRED, which is an AI function, can become an advisor to a board or even sit on a board and become a voice to be listened to within organizations. It's non-intrusive. It's not even a real person, but it becomes a contrast and a catalyst for an alternative view on how this organization should be run, worked, and execute its decisions, etc. So that's just a thought and an idea for you to think about. And I'll have another conversation maybe with Andy around that as well, because there's parallel thoughts in that regard. I just think that, using AI for something which then has a very positive impact and could enter organizations as such, just to provide an alternative voice would maybe be a way to develop fiat going forward. But thanks again for your wonderful work.
Thank you, Robert. I don't know, Andy, do you want to comment before I come in?
No, after you, sir, after you. Then we'll go to Eric. Thank you.
So first of all, just really touched by your comment, and actually I've thought about it, but it's been a fleeting thought, and it's nice to have someone as substantial as you are thinking about this, and now wanting to talk to Andy about something in regard to his work as well in this. Another way that I've thought of AI, I mean, I think AI could be a huge support here, absolutely huge, and I have not fleshed it out with fiat, but I have fleshed it out with truth. Truth is something that, we're constantly hearing whose truth and I can't believe that and all that. It's time we return to an understanding. And humanity has made huge developments over millennia as to in terms of what the truth is, from scientific truth to the standards of a jury, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, the standards of investigative journalism. In America, we had the fairness doctrine. There's standards of just measurement. And here we are kind of undermining all of that, throwing it all away. AI could be extremely helpful. And I've got nearly finished, 95% finished with an article about the bell curve of truth. And so if we understand truth as what is the truth we need in public communication to run a democratic society and to have a transparent society, and then the conspiracy stuff and the alternatives go way out on the edge of that bell curve of truth. And AI could help establish what that is. And it's not that we want to eliminate all points of view. We don't want to do that at all. Galileo at one point was way off in conspiracy theory land. People, at least that's what people thought, when in fact he knew the truth. So we need all of that. But AI, I'm totally with you. Let's make AI something that makes civilization sustainable for thousands of years. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, George. Thank you, Robert. Mr. Eric Smith, all the way in, I forget where it is in the USA. Remind me, Eric, where are you?
A little bit north and west of Detroit. So, George, if you're ever in this area, just give me a call and we can similarly meet for a chat. I was very interested in the topic and what you've said, because I spent several decades as a practicing lawyer, and every interaction with a client is a fiduciary interaction. So a fiduciary in all things is an inherent part of the profession. And I would suggest that one of the paths that you could use to spread the word on this is the legal profession. Yeah. And the people within the legal profession who are used to living under these, concepts, might be the perfect mouthpiece, for you. But I did have an issue, and it's with and I put 2 comments in the chat, so you can refer to them later if you'd like. One of them, and I'm going to address the last one first, which is I have a bit of an issue with making this the, quote, law of the land. And I have a long background in Chinese philosophy and martial arts, and the Taoists believed that laws were only necessary because humanity has lost its virtue, its goodness. Laws, in the order of things, are the very bottom, where you're compelling behavior, and that compulsory behavior is the opposite of freedom. So I would have issue with, trying to make it the law of the land. The first comment deals with empowerment. The choice to live like this, the choice of adoption of fiduciary in all things, is in fact a choice that requires personal power. Empowerment. We choose because we can choose. because we believe that what we're choosing is right. And so what we focused on in our effort, and Andy knows this because we're perfectly aligned with transparency. We believe transparency is a part of empowerment. You need clear, transparent fact situations to be able to make the most important decisions. So we focused on decision assistance technology. And with regard to AI, we're just in the process of filing a major patent application on AI with one key difference that hasn't come up in the discussion, and that is this. The critical issue with AI is the loss of personal autonomy and the fear that we will never be smart enough to make our own decisions. And so what we're focusing on are ways in which AI is always ultimately subject to a human choice, a human decision, and not the abdication of it or being told by AI what we ought to do, what we need to do, but provided a range of transparent choices that empower us to make a better decision. So it's a little bit different twist to everything, but I thought I'd share that with you.
Yeah. Wonderful. And again, Andy, shall I go first?
Yeah, please do. Please do.
So, a couple things. The reference to Chinese philosophy is a reference to Lao Tzu and Taoism, and there were two, as you know, major schools of philosophy still working all the way through. The one that really took root more than Taoism. Taoism traveled closer to the Buddhist tradition ultimately, but the one that took greater root in society was Confucianism. And Confucius was once asked why, there were 7 warring states at that time. It wasn't that much different from what's happening right now. 7 warring states, and he was respected as a thinker. He wanted to be the governor of one of these states, but he never accomplished that. But he was asked by one of the rulers, how can I stop my people from, they're just thieving all the time? And he said, if you were to stop thieving from them, you would see them stop thieving from each other. And and the when you have 3 billionaires versus 180 million, it's pretty hard to see that. And I think that and so just in regard to kind of the law of the land as such, if fiat were the law of the land, I'm with you. I don't want a lot of laws. That's there, and I'm totally with Lao Tzu on that. I don't want a lot of laws. And one of the reasons I'm for fiat is that I don't want a lot of laws. I think that if fiat were the law of the land, we would not need all the laws that we have. And the reason is that right now we give so much primacy to profit that there are violations of the planet, of the client,
Yeah.
of humanity, of the truth, of democracy. And so we constantly are trying to create laws to address that. That's a waste of time. It's totally inefficient. And if it were the law of the land, we would have people at the top who were wise, as Confucius perhaps, maybe as wise as Lao Tzu, and I don't think we would need so much regulation.
Well, let me touch on that, what you just said for just a moment. And that is what's really needed, what you just described without saying it, is that people need to understand the profitability of fiduciary behavior.
That's right.
If you truly understand,
and in barbarous terms as well,
the value of fiduciary behavior in your interactions, you don't need a law.
That's
so
right.
Perhaps it's simply more education, George, providing the examples with living examples of it that really makes the point. I'm just concerned about, the resistance. Every action leads to an equal and opposite reaction. You force something on someone and it creates resistance by the mere application of force. And the word law is a loaded term in that from someone who's practiced it for years and been very disappointed with my own profession in that regard. So these are just thoughts I'm sharing. Use whatever you think might be useful.
We're having a beautifully rich conversation, and it's so thought-provoking. Thank you very much, Eric. George, I'm going to make a note here. We've got Catriona Glascott with us from Client Earth, an organisation I rate very highly. Catriona, after we've heard from Seb Elwell, please do talk about the James Thornton, who I think is a Buddhist. I think his how can I put it this way? The energy the chief exec or the chairman of your organization puts out is very on the kind of wavelength of what we're talking about here. And I'm thinking George could be a really good contact for him and vice versa. But I'll come back to you in a moment, Kat, just to introduce yourself and have a chat about your chairman if you like. But let's first of all go to Seb Elwell. Seb, thanks for your patience. You've had your digital hand up for a while. Thank you.
You don't have to break the flow of the conversation. I'm happy to give way to Kat.
You're a gentleman, sir. Kat, can we do that? Kat, you're chairman. Is it chairman or chief exec? I can't remember. But tell us about James Thornton and his. I'm gonna feel a bit daft putting it this way, but tell us about his energy and what his kind of philosophy is, because I think it chimes in so beautifully to the conversation we're having right now. Thank you, Kat.
Thanks very much, Andy. James Thornton is our founder at Client Earth. He was our CEO for since the beginning, and actually stepped back from that role last year to he's still our founder and advocate and so on, but we have a new CEO. But you're absolutely right, Andy, and it sounds as though you may know James much better than I do. He is a Buddhist, and his belief strongly is that the law has the power to help the earth and to help people and nature thrive together. And it's on that basis that he, as a lawyer, founded Client Earth. And that's the philosophy that we still pursue, including in our work on fiduciary duties, which I'm leading on at the moment. And I hope we will return to Seb, because I know I've chatted to Seb before, and he has some great thoughts about fiduciary duties. And I'd like to thank you, Andy, for arranging this today and for your ongoing work with the Transparency Task Force. But also, George, I particularly liked what you said and what Andy picked up on about getting the vision first. And I think that is a really inspiring and important thing for us to bear in mind, and something which, as lawyers, thinking about the legal structures of fiduciary duty and how it applies in different contexts, we can lose sight of the bigger picture and the end goal and the vision. And it was great to hear you talk about that today, and really quite inspiring. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kat.
I am very, very generally feeling very energized and reinvigorated. I've been absolutely worn out all day, working too hard, etc., etc. I feel absolutely wide awake right now. I really do. Thank you, Kat. Thank you, George. Let's now go to gentleman Seb Elwell. Seb.
Hello, everyone. Seb Elwell here. Yeah, thank you, George. That was really inspiring. I also write about financial planning theory, so I think I probably grew up and became a financial planner having read some of your work, or at least people who'd reinterpret it and sort of trained it out to me. And then I went one step further and said, but how does this apply in the age of climate breakdown? And that led me to starting to think and write about fiduciary duty as well, and think about vulnerable clients. But I thought I'd pick up on Andy's provocation to say, why is degrowth not out there? And I think degrowth is inevitable. And it is very, very mainstream and obvious thought that degrowth is inevitable, and it will happen in one or two ways. It will be done to us by nature, because we are exceeding planetary boundaries, and our timescales for being able to continue that are looking increasingly short. I've had a very, very bad week because I was chatting to one of the authors from the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries this week, who wrote Planetary Solvency, and they have a risk dashboard. And I thought their risk dashboard was calibrated to 2100. And he said, no, it's calibrated to 2050. So I don't think I'll get to.
What does that mean? What does that mean, Seb? What does that mean? What does that mean?
So the institute, so an actuary is a risk professional.
Yeah.
You know, their job is to understand and communicate risk and advise financial institutions and governments and everybody else. And they have had a long-standing collaboration with Exeter University and their system scientists. And they've produced a series of very, very good reports, Emperor's New Climate Scenarios, Climate Scorpions. The latest one is Planetary Solvency. And alongside that, they've put a risk dashboard. So they've said this is, if we carry on our current trajectory, then they have put some timescales and some numbers, and that is a 90% likelihood of catastrophic to extreme climate risk by 2050. And they categorize that as circa 50% of the world dead, the financial system essentially gone. And within that context, I don't think I'll get to 77, and I don't think my children will. And that makes financial planning rather hard, because we're drawing timelines for clients that say, look, everything goes to zero. Everyone you know and love is not doing so well. But that's where ideas like this, I think, are so important, because that is just a projection of the future. It is not an inevitable reality. If we don't implement the ideas of degrowth, then nature will degrow us. So that was kind of drawing it back to, I think I'm probably starting to ramble now, so I'll end there.
Talk about talk about a wake-up call. I don't know how else to respond to that, Seb. I mean, that is just so damn hard-hitting, isn't it?
Well, I mean, technically, from a fiduciary duty perspective, fiduciary duty says fiduciaries must weigh financially material factors. As I understand it, that's our current law. Yet I don't think most people are taking that information that the risk profession has given us and weighing it in every decision that they are making. And to my mind, that means when people are not, then that's a breach of fiduciary duty right there and then. So we need to start enforcing it.
This is powerful stuff. We're going to go to Nigel Cairns, then we're going to go to George for his sort of final comments and wrap up thoughts. And of course, if anybody's itching to share anything else after Nigel has spoken, please do raise your hand. Nigel Cairns. Thank you, Nigel.
Thank you. Yes, I'd just like to say, firstly, that I was very impressed and agreed with, I think, pretty much everything that Barbara Williams was saying earlier on. Her arguments were cogent, rational, and scientifically based, and extremely compelling. And to follow on from that, I just wanted to ask George a question. Basically, what political parties are you aware of that have endorsed the ideals of fiduciary in all things? Or, major politicians? Is it something that's catching on in mainstream politics?
I hope not. At least not at this point. The mainstream politics is all governed by billionaires, and they have their self-concern, and I don't want this stuff to be touched by them if possible. But it's not for me in many ways. I think what's important is grassroots. And if you develop enough grassroots, then some politicians are going to be able to say, hey, this is worth really listening to. And we've certainly talked to a number of politicians, but it's not, this is not our focus at this point.
But shouldn't we be introducing the conversation as much as possible?
Well, it would be wonderful, but I can't imagine it happening with the politics of, certainly in the U.S. I can't imagine it, and I mean that with great respect for one of the parties that I happen to vote with, but
I agree with you, but I see it as a massive problem.
Well, of course it's a massive problem, but you don't. One of the things we learned in life planning is that if you have a really strong vision, people move to make the solutions happen. And so my focus is let's make the vision as strong as we possibly can. And that's why I'd love your support. I'd love you to get on the Fiduciary and All Things website, and anything that you see that you would be supportive of, it would be fantastic. But I think that we have to get there, Nigel. And I think that we get there by spreading the word. And I need people like you to help spread the word. And my speaking once or twice a week, that ain't going to do it. We need more people speaking. So that's where I'm at right now. And I'd be very hesitant if a politician were talking about it. I'd be a little bit worried right at this point. Yeah, you can't win in politics without a billionaire.
Fascinating insights. We really are having this wonderful conversation at an incredibly interesting, inverted commas, interesting time. There's so much going on in the world, isn't there? So much to feel quite down about. But for me, the big takeaway from this conversation, for me personally, is the rekindling of the idea of that vision. I think I've allowed myself to get burdened by the challenges and the obstacles and the friction in the system. And I've let go of that beautiful vision that in my mind was the Eloi in the Time Machine film. We're going to go to Barbara, then we're going to go back to George for his final wrap-up thoughts. Barbara Williams.
Thank you very much, Seb and Nigel, for your and as far as politics go, we need an emergency government. We're in an emergency. We need all parties to put their heads together to behave in ways that will maximise mitigation, and that's where George's fiat idea can flourish. And along with, we've got Gary Stevenson doing excellent work challenging the wealth hierarchy, and my own idea, which is the global aspiration for ecological justice. There's loads of concepts out there. We just need the government to acknowledge that we're in a very serious emergency and to start behaving as though we're doing something about it, or prepared to do something about it.
Barbara, thank you. Mr. George Kinder, we are all very grateful to you for igniting what I hope are many fresh thoughts in our minds today, as well as rekindling some old thoughts as well. Over to you, sir, for your final thoughts. Thank you, George.
Well, it's been lovely being here with you all, and I've really appreciated the challenges, the thoughts, the support, and just being with a group as dedicated as you are to transparency, to making the world a better place. I hope I'll see more of you, and I feel one with you. I think if I were to say anything to add to Barbara's and Nigel's and some of Seb's points, I think the reason my only hesitation with degrowth is that I think we all continue to grow, and what I want to see is growth that is beautiful in here.
Inside.
And that's something that I think will add a lot to the world that we're seeing, and I think Fiduciary and All Things helps to set it up. So anyway, thank you so much. Thank you, Andy. It's been a great pleasure.
Mr. George Kinder, thank you very much. We consider you a wonderful thought leader and inspirer and thought provoker and friend. Thank you very much, George. Good night, everybody. Good night. Happy travels for those of you who are traveling. Cheers.